Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 3. We would like to present our material. The title is Personality Factors. With us Nurul Fahira, Raden Nurmiyati Haslita, Zahra Zikrilla, and Zulfia Darmilah. First is about the affective domain. First, affect refers to emotion or feeling, and the second one, the affective domain, is the emotional side of human behavior, and it may be juxtaposed to the cognitive side. The definition of the affective domain, according to Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues, such as Krathwohl, Bloom and Masia, 1964, it includes receiving, responding, valuing, organization, and value system. Affective factors in second language acquisition. The first one is self-esteem. It is probably the most pervasive aspect of human behavior. There are three general levels of self-esteem have been described in the literature to capture its multidimensionality. First, general or global self-esteem is said to be relatively stable in a mature adult and is resistant to change except by active and extended therapy. Second, situational or specific self-esteem refers to one's self-appraisal in particular life situation, such as social interaction, work, education, home, or on certain relatively discretely defined traits, such as intelligence, communicative ability, athletic ability, or personality traits like gregariousness, empathy, and flexibility. The third, task self-esteem relates to particular tasks within specific situations. The second factor is attribution theory and self-efficacy. Underlying the issues and questions about the role of self-esteem in language learning are the foundational concepts of attribution and self-efficacy. The third factor is willingness to communicate, a factor related to attribution and self-efficacy, one that has seen a surge of recent interest in the research literature is the extent to which learners display a willingness to communicate as they tackle a second language. The last factor is inhibition, yet another variable that is closely related to, and in some cases subsumed under, the notion of self-esteem and self-efficacy is the concept of inhibition.
Five is risk taking. Risk taking is an important characteristic of successful learning of a second language. Learners have to be able to gamble a bit, to be willing to try out hankers about the language and take the risk of being wrong. According to BB, describe some of the negative ramifications that foster fear of risk taking both in the classroom and in natural setting. In the classroom, this ramification might include a bad grade in the course, a fail on the exam, a reproach from the teacher, a smirk from a classmate, punishment or embarrassment imposed by oneself. Outside the classroom, individuals learning a second language face other negative consequences if they make mistake. The seven is empathy. In common terminology, empathy is the process of putting yourself into someone else's shoes, of reaching beyond the self and to understand what another person is feeling. It is probably the major factor in the harmonious coexistence of individuals in society. Language is one of the primary means of empathizing, but nonverbal communication facilitates the process of empathizing and must not be overlooked. Empathy is not synonymous with sympathy. Empathy applies more possibility of detachment. Sympathy connotes an agreement or harmony between individuals. The sixth is anxiety. Anxiety plays a major effective role in second language acquisition, even though we all know what anxiety is and we all have experienced feelings of anxiousness. Anxiety is still not easy to define in a simple sentence. According to Spielberger, defined anxiety as the subjective feeling of tension, apprehension, nervousness, and worry associated with an arousal of the autonomic nervous system. In anxiety, there are trait anxiety, state anxiety, and language anxiety. The eighth is extroversion. Extroversion and its counterpart, introversion, are also potentially important factors in the acquisition of a second language. Is the extent to which a person has a deep-seated need to receive ego enhancement, self-esteem, and a sense of wholeness from other people as opposed to receiving that affirmation within oneself. Extroverts actually need other people in order to feel good, but extroverts are not necessarily loud-mouthed and talkative. They may be relatively shy but still need the affirmation of others. Next is motivation. According to Weiner and et al., motivation is a star player in the cast of characters assigned to second language learning scenarios around the world. Such assumptions are of course not erroneous, for countless studies and experiments in human learning have shown that motivation is a key to learning in general. Next is theories of motivation values. Theories of motivation values have been proposed over the course of decades of research. Three different perspectives emerge. First, from a behavioral perspective, motivation is seen in a very matter-of-fact terms. It is quite simple, the anticipation of reward, driven to acquire positive reinforcement and driven by previous experiences of reward for a behavior. We act accordingly to achieve further reinforcement. Skinner, Pavlov, and Thorndike put motivation at the center of their theories of human behavior in a behavioral view. Performance in task and motivation to do so is likely to be at the mercy of external force, parents, teacher, peers, educational requirements, job specifications, and so forth. The second, in cognitive terms, motivation places much more emphasis on the individual's decision. According to Keller, stated that the choices people make as to what experiences approach or avoid, and the degree of effort they will exert in that respect. And the last, a constructivist view of motivation places even further emphasis on social content as well as individual person choices. Abraham Maslow viewed motivation as a construct in which ultimate attainment of goals was possible only by passing through a hierarchy of needs, three of which were solidly grounded in community, belonging, and social status. Motivation, in a constructivist view, is derived as much from our interactions with others as it is from one's self-determination.
Instrumental and integrative orientation. The instrumental refer to acquiring a language as a means for attaining instrumental goals that are furthering a career, reading technical material, translation, and so forth. The integrative described learners who wish to integrate themselves into the culture of the second language group and become involved in social interchange in that group. Darney 2001b, Garner and McIntyre 1991, and others have not, are more appropriately term orientation, that is, depending on whether a learner's context or orientation is one, academic or career-related instrumental, or two, socially or culturally oriented integrative. Different needs may be fulfilled in learning a foreign language. Intrinsic motivation. Intrinsically motivated activities are ones for which there is no apparent reward except the activity itself. Intrinsically motivated behaviors are aimed at bringing about certain internally rewarding consequences, namely feelings of competence and self-determination. Then extrinsic motivation is fueled by the anticipation of a reward from outside and beyond the self. Typical extrinsic rewards are money, praise, grades, and even certain types of positive feedback. The Neurobiology of Affect, Josh Humans, 1999, 1998, 1997, Schumann et al. 2004, work in this area has singled out one section of temporal lobes of human brain, the amygdala, as a major player in the relationship of affect to language learning. The amygdala is instrumental in our ability to make an appraisal of stimulus. If you see or hear or taste something, the amygdala helps you decide whether or not your perception is novel, pleasant, relevant to your needs or goals, manageable, you can potentially cope with it, and compatible with your own social norms and self-concept. Personality types and language acquisition. Myers-Briggs team tests for dichotomous style of functioning in the Myers-Briggs test. There are introversion I versus extroversion E. Introversion I, there are territoriality, concentration, internal, depth, intensive. Then extroversion E, there are sociability, interaction, external, breadth, and extensive. Then sensing S versus intuition I. Sensing S, there are experience, past, realistic, perspiration, actual. And then intuition I, there are hunches, future, speculative, inspiration, and possible.
Thinking versus feeling. Thinking has character types, objective, principles, policy, laws, and criterion, while feeling has character types, subjective, values, social values, extenuating circumstances, and intimacy. Next is judging versus perceiving. Judging has character types, settle, decided, fix, plan ahead, and run one's life, while perceiving has character types, pending, gather more data, flexible, adapt as you go, and let life happen. There are three measuring affective factors. The first is the most important issue in measuring affectivity is the problem of validity. Because most tests use a self-rating method, one can justifiably ask whether or not self-perception are accurate. The second is related problem in the measurement of affective variables lies in what has been called self-flattery syndrome. In general, test taker will try to discern right answers to questions, even though test directions say there are no right or wrong answer. The third is tests of extroversion, anxiety, motivation, and other factors can be quite culturally ethnocentric, using concepts and references that are difficult to interpret cross-culturally. There are three intrinsic motivations in the classroom. The first is thinking about the interplay in the classroom between intrinsic and extrinsic motives. Every educational institution brings with it certain extrinsically driven factors: a prescribed school curriculum, a teacher's course goals and objectives, parental experience, institutional assessment requirements, and perhaps even messages from society at large that tell us to compete against others and to avoid failure. And the second is applying issues of intrinsic motivation is to consider how our own design of classroom techniques can have an added dimension of intrinsic motivation. And the last is considering the Ten Commandments for motivating learners.
That's all from us. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.